Hello. Hi, I am I am one of the representatives, I would say, from Students for Democratic Society. Our group works around campus to kind of bring attention to a lot of inequality matters, and we work with Mr. Budimir on a regular basis. He's our advisor, and he just wanted to kind of, this is very important to him. So, I mean, obviously, clearly, that's why you're here too, I'm sure. But just kind of bring to attention some of the inequalities that people are facing and injustices, and basically kind of show how we got here. So thank you all for coming, and I will let Mr. Budimir start.
Can everyone hear me? Thank you, Dr. Weibel. Thanks, Az. So my plan is I really wanted to end the semester before we had the captive audience of all the students. I really felt, as was telling you, really strongly about that everything we're seeing in the United States, all of the politics, all of the inequality that we're seeing, or all of the strange politics, hence the how do we get here? Many of you are feeling this way, people on the left, but people on the right are saying, how did we end up here? And I really strongly feel that inequality, come right in, Riley. That inequality is driving this. So I'll be concise, there'll be lots of colors and pictures, and we'll go fast, and then we'll talk. So my task tonight is to show in very broad outlines how large-scale changes in the balance of class forces were facilitated by changes in politics rather than supposedly irresistible forces of globalization. This new imbalance in class forces, this one-sided class war waged by corporate America, has made our politics meaner, our workers less secure, degraded the workplace, and fabulously enriched the already wealthy. I do want to dedicate today, that is me when I had a goatee, to dearly departed sociologist Michael Buravoy, who this picture is from one of our own rooms. He was here in 2014. He was killed by a car in Berkeley, California on, I believe it was February 2nd of 2025, and he was an inspiration to a couple of generations of Marxist sociologists. Thank you, Michael. And that is me with a Marx puppet. Tons of stuff. In the 2000 campaign, which was highly contested, Bush ran on the idea that he was a compassionate conservative. Then in 2001, after 9/11, we swung over to Bush being the war president, the president with war on my mind. And we invaded Afghanistan and gave a tax cut. In 2003, we invaded Iraq on totally false pretenses. Nothing the government or the president claimed was true, and we passed another tax cut. In 2007, the Great Recession, caused by crazy speculation and lack of government oversight, some of the highest unemployment in a generation. 2008, Barack Obama was elected, certainly a new face for the country. By 2010, the reactionary Tea Party, which was an anti-tax, pro-business, and middle-class movement, was energized in opposition partly to Obama. By 2011, the Occupy movement put the idea of inequality on the map. The re-election of Obama, Mitt Romney famously said that the 47% of America was hopelessly lost to the Republicans because of the social assistance that this 47% get, that are dependent on welfare. In 2015, Mr. Trump, the outsider, but also Senator Bernie Sanders, the left outsider, had a contentious campaign. In 2017, Trump is in, huge tax cuts, 2 impeachments, 2020, COVID shutdowns, relief spending, 2021, Joe Biden, the so-called normal president, with huge spending and infrastructure bills, which were hardly at all sold to the public. Here's a question. So just a little overview, where we've been in 25 years. Some of you were not even born for some of that. So key theme, growing inequality. I want you to think about this. I've left something out and I've left the date out. But, hear this and let's see what it says. Blank, there's a blank up there. A second Gilded Age in which many Americans made and spent money abundantly. Yet, as the decade ended, too many stretched limousines, too many enormous incomes, and too much high fashion foreshadowed a significant shift of mood, a new plutocracy. Some critics were even using the word oligarchy, had created a new target for populist reaction. What should belong in the first blank? Dr. Roddy, the famous, wonderful guy. The 1920s. Jan? Yeah, that was the same I was going to guess. The 1920s. That also fits. Any other guesses? Move on, Budimir, move on. That's what I'm hearing. The 1980s. So when I was in an elementary school, this author, when was this book written? Give me a date. Give me a date. Mary Valentine, give me a date. Oh. So from Kevin Phillips, 1990, he's using the words plutocracy and oligarchy. Plutocracy and oligarchy. If you think about it now, astute observers have been focusing on plutocracy, oligarchy, and inequality for decades, not just when Bernie Sanders has been focusing on it in the last, few months, but also decades, or when Robert Reich starts to use it. So many astute observers have been quite keen on the growing inequality. Okay, did you like that one? Let's do one more. Growing inequality. Disparities in wealth and income have always characterized our country, but during the last decades of this century, we are becoming a more rigidly two-tiered society. Not since the 1930s have we seen such an economically stratified society as America today. When did this author write it? Jan? I heard 90s now. Okay, you guys are pretty good. Okay, so the America's Working Poor, 1995, before most of you students were born. Again, before 1 year after I graduated high school. So, just saying. A little old. Wow. I did drink an Ensure on the way over here from Coopersville, just so you know. Growing inequality. Let's take one snapshot of this inequality. Share of aggregate income. The bottom 80% of the population lost income over the 13 years of Obama, Trump, and Biden. So the bottom 80%, according to this American population survey, lost about 1.1% of income, and that was all picked up by the top 20%, and you can kind of, just think about that. Just in, 13 years, the bottom 20%, just think, you can read, 20% of the population is 68 million people who live on about 3% of the national income. And yes, there are income transfers and SNAP benefits, but is this the right way to run a society? I promised colors. So you are reading this right. We lived in a much more equal society in the 1960s and 70s. From the year before I was born, just about here, the bottom 50% of the population has lost ground. right? The bottom 50% has lost ground, lost their share of national income, while the wealthiest 1% have just about doubled their share of income. Just to drive this home, many community college students, some employees, even at the college, are in the bottom 50%. The U.S. is the most unequal country of all of these allied English-speaking nations. Really, think about what this is saying. The bottom 50% of the population, including many of you, exist on 13% of the national income. With what you are supposed to pay, with this, you're supposed to pay rent, maybe a mortgage, groceries, clothes, and educate your children. For the last 2 years in a row, the U.S. has registered its highest population of homeless ever. Do you think that's a good economic policy? Is that the best? Like, ask yourself, is that the best we can do? Does that even sound like a good economic policy to design a system and encourage more income and wealth to flow to the top and restrict wages and income and wealth at the bottom? So, you're showing us graphs, Budimir, but how does this impact us locally? This is from this morning, or at least it was published on April 27th. Very local, right? So one of the local consequences of inequality is conflict, right, between small business, who is also squeezed, maybe they're in the mid 60 to 80%, and the bottom. So I just mentioned the homeless population has reached record levels in the last 2 years. And what happens? Property owners say no. Where are people to go? Where are people to go? Now, this is something near and dear to my heart, is massive union decline. I can't stress enough how much the decline in organized labor hurts the American worker. Some of my students have seen this graphic way too much. The working class and the middle class. So not only in terms of reduced wages, but reduced power, reduced voice at the bargaining table, not only in less protection from arbitrary orders or dismissal, not only does the decline in organized labor reduce the amount of time off and vacation time employees get, but in addition, the decline changes people's consciousness. It sort of plants Henry Ford in the brain. It makes people feel alone and isolated and hopeless and ineffective. And I cannot stress enough how the decline in organized labor changes politics. If politicians don't have to fear a strong and unified voice backed by people power, they are for sale to the highest corporate bidder. And that can stand for both parties. This says it all from Nelson Mandela. What is wanted by the ruling circle is a docile, spineless, unorganized, and inarticulate army of workers. Now, in this graphic, the Heritage Foundation, they thought they were being cute or clever. And this chart would make people feel enraged that the poor little rich people making above $700,000 a year were paying 46% of the income taxes. What they didn't realize that this graph also shows is that half of the country is living off of only 10% of the income. I guess they missed that one, huh? Half the country lives on 10% of the income. By the way, there are other taxes besides income taxes, and there are sales taxes, if you think about it, which are very regressive on lower income folks. Do the rich. So increasing inequality, declining unionization, and we are not taxing the rich. Think about what Bob Kerrey, Sam Nunn, some of these are Republicans, Robert Rubin, Paul Volcker, they said in 2003, before some of you were born, they warned, it is neither fiscally nor morally responsible to give ourselves tax cuts and leave future generations with an even higher tax burden. What did we do? We've had two major tax cuts, 2003 and 2017. And they were warning of all these things. Wave of retirements, putting stress on the system, fiscal challenges. Bush and Congress did it anyway. Complicated graph, but at least they're colors. At least there's colors on these, right? What has happened? What has happened? So, not taxing the rich from Thomas Piketty, Capital and Ideology in the 20th century. So the effective tax rates on top incomes were much, much higher, right? Much, much higher. The very rich paid much, much higher taxes in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and even the 70s. Now what we see is a tax convergence, right? A lower tax convergence along with massively growing inequality and wealth at the top. So watch the next slide carefully. I elongated it a little bit to show how debt explodes at the same time as taxes decrease. So debt explodes, 2024, we're at 35.46 trillion. Taxes decrease, right? You decrease taxes, especially on the affluent and the wealthy, and you increase the debt. Interestingly about the debt, in 2025, it costs $478 billion. I'm looking at my dear friend Angela, who is one of our great workers here, said, Mr. Budimir, these numbers, but $478 billion in interest a year. This is your interest on your car note, right? So it costs that much to maintain the national debt. So that is interest on it. So 16 cents out of every dollar the government spends goes to the creditors. It's not China. Don't say that. I'll show you why. Most of these are domestic banks and finance. So that is one. So this is one reason that when bond markets panicked, President Trump paused the tariffs, right? Because the bond markets keep the borrowing cost relatively low, at least for now. So that interest paid, if you think about it, is the cost to keep taxes artificially low on the rich. So you are paying the interest to keep the rich rich. Who holds that debt? It's, don't say China. Nope. Not by a long shot. Our own Federal Reserve, our own mutual, right? I outlined it by hand in red so we can see. There's China. Even Japan holds more of our debt. Mostly we owe the debt to ourselves. Federal Reserve, mutual funds, and other domestic forms. Social Security, we owe a lot to. More, right? But if you hear some politicians, all they'll say is we owe it to foreigners. That's very false. So please, so that you folks know, that is very false. We owe it to our own elite, some might say capitalist class. This is what the 2017 tax cuts did, where the money went. So every time, so how much? So if you're in the lowest fifth, I see a few of you in the lowest fifth. Oh, a few more. This is your tax. You got a tax cut of about $110. I'm sure you spent that on gas in less than a week. But the top tenth of 1%, got gobs of tax breaks. Very, very, very skewed. Yes, everyone in the bottom 60% got a pittance. They got a little bit. While the truly rich handsomely rake in both debt-bursting tax giveaways and help to pass tax policies. And tax policies like these cause inequality to grow even faster because it's not doing the proper job of redistributing income to the most needy, such as the homeless, which are exploding, while also looting the treasury and indebting the nation. Well, but these tax cuts create jobs. Oh, no, they don't. Because here you go, Harvard Business Review, right? I wrote it by hand so you all can see it. They used $800 billion of the 2017 tax cut to buy their own stock, not to create jobs. So the tax cuts are used to enrich CEOs, increase the stock price, which increases CEO pay. The biggest policy, I know we're talking about all kinds of things, but the biggest policy on President Trump's agenda is to make the 2017 tax cuts permanent. It's not about trans folks playing football or basketball or anything like that. The biggest policy he's interested is making these basically looting of the treasury by the 1% and 1/100th of 1% permanent. So not oligarchy, kleptocracy. If you look at the military spending of the United States, as well as other countries, it looks like we have, since the 2010s, matched and now exceeded the military spending at the end of the Cold War. This spending is relatively widely considered by many, not all, to have been wasteful and unnecessary. And it seems the world, and the United States in particular, is embroiled in a new global arms race of wasteful military spending. I mean, really quick, this is yes, we have these long periods of economic expansion, but there's a problem. There's a problem. The growth rate ain't there. The growth rate has to be high. And as economist Thomas Piketty, the French economist, says, the number matters. So what's happening here is the rate of growth of investments is paying off more than the rate of growth of wages and productivity. So we have these huge, unprecedented, Obama, Biden, and Trump have all praised these long periods of economic expansion, but the number is low. So that means that the payout on capital is much higher than the return on economic growth. Consumer confidence, I mean, that says something. My own measly IRA back in April, that was one of the first days of the lost about $3,000. I have had a few of my colleagues say they're going to be working a couple of extra years. So what does all this mean? Oops. So it's supposed to say politics and culture respond, but my clip from Monty Python was over there. So this is a little bit long, but this is what does all this mean? So there's an enormous, an unprecedented 40 or 50-year class war by the upper echelons of society, transferring huge wealth to the top, and the bottom 80% or so are becoming more precarious and sort of unstable and uncertain. So what is this happening? What is happening here? I got a little bit here for you, but we're getting close. So all of this runaway inequality, linked to the declining working class unionization, the burgeoning of the digital economy, has created much more individualism, including types of escapism, like lifestyle escapism, consumerism, an enormous digital economy of influencers. Hold on, I gotta post something. Right, a huge economy of influencers that have an interest in the unequal economy. So we have religious movements responding, including much of evangelical Christianity that offers more of a spiritual escape from the economy. And often, in my view, offers justifications for a deeply unequal social system. Liberals and progressives have framed inequality in such a way that race is the only illegitimate form of inequality. What does this mean? If you're poor and white, tough luck. You have white privilege. In an adaptation to the new realities of class, we have seen people working too hard for too little and having to make all sorts of sacrifices in terms of family and personal fulfillment. On the far right, we see the framing of everything in terms of civilizational decline, nation decline, and in terms of a supposed eternal universal values of Judeo-Christianity. So hence the Western Civ warriors, alt-right and Jordan Peterson. Or we see renewed national chauvinism and renewed racism. All of this is a cloak or a consequence of the rising inequality and the politics of rich and poor. So just some images, ideas here. Rural red states that are very reliably Republican, but also receive more aid from the federal government than they send in taxes, repeatedly support candidates that would cut taxes further and exacerbate their own economic woes. These same rural red states are often controlled not by the voters, but by powerful agricultural, extractive, and sometimes financial interests, and have little or no countervailing power from the farmers, miners, and general population. So the people there are not arriving at some sort of political stance just in a vacuum, if you think about Thomas Frank's book, What's the Matter with Kansas? There are powerful interests shaping their views and what is possible. Think about Louisiana. Louisiana is captured by the oil industry. Don't blame the Louisiana fishermen. The oil industry has captured the state government of Louisiana. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth talks of a crusade against the internal enemy, leftists, progressives, and others, and heavily suggests future violence. But by the way, he has a BA from Princeton and an MPP from Harvard University. I think we have to understand that the same strong politicians who rail against the so-called educational elites, I would also mention the Harvard-trained lawyer Ted Cruz, they've all gone to these same elite institutions, but they use their elite institutional credentials to sort of hide that. Big religion. First Baptist Church Dallas, heavily funded by Texas oil money, wraps itself in the flag, the Bible, oil, and President Trump. The wall. And this applies to nationalisms of the left as well. Every nationalism is a disguised class project. In conclusion, this is what you're waiting for, right? We need to organize unions on a much higher level, which means labor needs to really fight and put its resources into organizing. There needs to be penalties, not rewards for union busting like Amazon and Starbucks. We need much more robust worker protections. Social Security needs to be saved, not gutted. This old man, Mr. Roy McDonald, who received the only honorary degree from MCC, who continued to be a student through his 89th birthday, was a longtime member of Safe and Secure Social Security Organization. So we need to tax the top incomes. He's next to one of these top income people, but he's hiding behind that. That's my dear student, Paul. Love you, Paul. But we need to tax the top incomes significantly more than we are, and redistributing that income in forms of benefits, education, care, and security for people in the bottom 80%. And not in the form of voluntary charitable aid, which is, of course, very important, but as a right enshrined in law and protected by the state. And finally, French economist Thomas Piketty has suggested for all that do not inherit, for all who do not inherit great wealth, that there be a $125,000 inheritance at the age of 25. Can we do it? I think we can do it. Thank you. And I think we have, Sasha will be coming around with the mic and any questions, and let's discuss anything you guys want to discuss. We are live. Somebody's got something. Mary. I got 4 different Marys here. Okay.
Hi, thank you. Hello. 3 quick statements. First is no tax break ever created a job. In fact, employers don't really create jobs. What creates jobs is demand. They never hire anybody unless they need people to make more stuff or to do more services. When there's demand, they hire more people. It's as simple as that. Now, if you pay people more, they'll have more money to spend. When they spend more money, it creates more demand. So feeding into the bottom will give you more rewards than feeding into the top. The second comes to unionization. The founding fathers of this country set about to separate power, to divide it up and spread power away from the center, because they could see having a king with the power concentrated. This worked against the benefits of everyone. Spreading the power outward was a necessity for us to become the country we became. Economic democracy is equally important, if not more important, and unions are the best tool to get economic equality and to spread democracy.
Make sure you pay your dues on the way out.
Yeah, and the last thing is that for all of my life, the rich have been telling the working poor people that their problems are all caused by other working poor people. In the meantime, as you've shown here, they get richer and richer and hold more and more power.
Yeah, that's fine. Back there, Nick.
You mentioned Amazon. So how do you see a path forward to stop the union busting? Because if you look at like Newark and the ones that did successfully create the union, they were immediately they shuffled off almost every one of those supervisors that were even present. They don't allow the forming of the union to be on company property anymore, so they've just made it so difficult. Where do you see the way to, that's such a powerhouse one to make an example of. I just don't know.
So I show this, I don't have it here, I show this little graphic all the time. Back in 1936, in our own state of Michigan, we took on the largest corporation in the world. At the time, it was General Motors, and one of their largest plants was located right in Flint. And they did it against all the odds. Yes, the law was sort of in their favor, but GM was the largest corporation in the world. They didn't want to unionize. They unionized by taking matters into their own hands, and they occupied the factory. Now, I mean, maybe because you saw that. Way back there. Basically that straight decline. I think we can't quite wait for the laws to change, because the laws really haven't changed much, whether a Democrat is in office or a Republican. Often more recently, the Republicans have accelerated right-to-work laws and sort of union busting laws. So that matters, but I haven't seen the Democrats pass legislation that helps unions form. It's a straight line down from 1954. So we have not. We need to desperately organize more workers.
Cool.
So I think it'll come from the workers themselves. I don't think it will come from the legislation. So, yeah, good question, Nick. More discussions, or what do you want to say? What do you?
Is it time for a general strike yet?
Maybe. You think about, I think it was last winter, there was a 3-day strike up and down the East Coast and the Gulf Coast by the East Coast longshoremen. That's just one union that basically shut down every port for, I think it was 2 days, maybe 48 hours. That's one union. Even though we're unbelievably low, we're 9.9%. That means 91% of all workers, or 90.9% of all workers are not unionized. So that means they have no voice. They're mostly at-will employees. So it's tough. We have, when unionization is so low, how do you get the leaders who are conservative and scared to act? I think it's going to probably come from worker militancy. So,
I was actually thinking of the grand general strike of the whole office.
Like an IWW type. It would just take people on the ground to do activism. It would take people on the ground talking to each other or sharing little TikToks of that, but I'm not everybody knows I'm a semi-Luddite, so you got to talk to each other face to face. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you.
I've, all my adult life, started actually as an activist when I was in 4th grade, and my mom took me to a civil rights protest in Lansing, Michigan in about 1963. It's always seemed to me what this has always been is a class war, and we have all these different things that distract us, but it's like Jesse Jackson said, we may have come over on different ships, but we're all in the same boat now.
Yeah.
So this morning I was watching the news, and this Mike Lawler, who is supposedly moderate Republican, he's one of the ones that got in 22 from New York State, and he had a town hall. And he kept putting people off because they kept saying tax the rich. And he kept saying, we've got to do these cuts because, taxing the rich is not going to reduce the deficit. And he just kept repeating it. And I thought to myself, well, it sure would go a long way. But here's my issue. Mm-hmm. Why is it, because I think Biden did a pretty good job of driving a stake in the heart of trickle-down economics. I really do. I think most people feel like, yeah, it didn't work, it never worked, and look where we are. Why aren't the Democrats, it just seems like people should be saying, why is this a good idea right now to extend these tax cuts? And it doesn't seem to be the message of the Democrats or anybody else. I don't get it.
If you look at the work of Jacob Hacker and Paul Pearson, they show you this over and over again, that there were two, I don't have this slide, but it was like the most unpopular pieces of legislation in the last 15 to 20 years. One of them was the repeal of Obamacare, the ACA, and the other piece of unbelievably unpopular, by surveys, by polls of the American, was the 2017 tax cut. So it is entirely driven by the priorities of the donor class and the financial elite. If you look, we have problems. I'm forgetting his last name. New York Senator. It looks like this. What? Schumer, right, Chuck. Yeah, Chuck and Nancy. They are, unfortunately, I know they take a lot of flack, but they're often Wall Street's senators and congresspeople, right? Chuck Schumer came in 1981 when I was 5. And he was known then as the congressman of Wall Street. And he and other people it's not just the Republicans. It is, if you look at the winner-take-all politics from 2010, Pearson and Hacker, there's a whole chapter called "The Democrats Climb Aboard," and the Democrats climbed aboard with the tax cuts and with the unions are dirty and old, and we need the unions to carry out the vote. But not pass any of their legislation. So it's been a sort of a two-sided collaboration between the parties. So it's not just been one party. We've had a lot of collaboration from the Democratic Party on tax cuts, on globalization, on look. My mom fell and was hospitalized, the second largest hospital in the city of Detroit, Henry Ford Hospital. I talked to 3 of the nurses. These are 3 African-American women. 2 were nurses, 1 was a CNA. All 3 of them had been in the United Auto Workers, but this hospital was unorganized in a Democratic stronghold in a city and state that's so innovative with unionization. I was like, I couldn't believe it. Hundreds of hospital workers, and they're unorganized. And I called the nurses union, state nurses union, and they told me, oh, those hospitals spend millions of dollars to prevent the nurses from organizing. So even our hospitals are spending millions of dollars to prevent our service workers, mostly women, from organizing and proper staffing. Wow, what a class war.
Well, it seems to me, besides Chuck Schumer, that
He's just one.
the mainstream media has a lot of responsibility here for not really doing any pushback. They act like it's a fait accompli and that they're going to just cut everything that matters to us to finance it.
Giant corporations own all of our media. Don't abandon the United States. This is a big country.
My daughter and her children.
Even when we're down low, think about the Depression. And then we had massive unionization. If you guys are done, I want to thank you. You have one more? Send me on the road. I got 12 classes a year, so thank you all for coming out today. It was really a pleasure.